So good morning and welcome to the Sharing Cities session here at the NENA conference. Again, I'm Darren, the Social Surplus and the NENA Steering Group and the Aussie editor of Shareable. It's great to have you here with us. Today we're going to hear from 4 different speakers about the emergence of sharing cities, a fairly recent development which is seeing empowered communities coming together to co-govern a variety of shared resources that include public spaces, parks, city streets, open data, infrastructure and a range of other assets. First up, I'm going to explore how the city has become an important platform for common practices through case studies from around the world which show how communities are working together with enabling city partners to co-govern shared resources for mutual benefit. Following my talk, we're going to hear from Inka, Santala and Pauline McGuirk from the University of Wollongong on creating Sydney as a sharing city, exploring actually existing communal sharing. And then we'll hear from McBurney with his presentation on bHive, a community-owned sharing economy platform for Bendigo. Okay, so my talk today is really coming out of the work that I was involved in putting together this book here, Sharing Cities Activating the Urban Commons, which has been published by Shareable, the sharing economy news and action hub based in the Bay Area in San Francisco. Been around for about 10 years. This was a 2-year project of 15 sharing city innovators. I was one of 2 Aussie contributors, myself and Sharon based in Adelaide. I co-wrote the work and waste chapters. So I'll be talking quite a bit about ideas that have come out of the book. But to kick things off, I just wanted to, given the theme of the conference, touch on how the commons can provide opportunities to democratise planning and the governance of our cities in the early 21st century. And when we're talking about the commons, I think it's just good to reflect on some, first principles, some ideas, obviously from folks like David Bollier, who's a key advocate, commons advocate, and he talks about the commons as the wealth that we inherit or create together and must pass on, undiminished or enhanced to our children. Our collective wealth includes the gifts of nature, civic infrastructure, cultural works and traditions and knowledge. And it's said that there's no commons without commoning, so it's important to really understand that a commons is a resource. In this case, I'm just giving you an example from the Commons Transition Primer, the Peer-to-Peer Foundations, to shout out to leading thinkers in this space like Michelle Bowens, who was here recently. And the Peer-to-Peer Foundation remind us that the commons is a resource like encyclopedia entries in Wikipedia, a community made up of the authors and the editors that contribute to those articles, and then a set of rules around content and editing guidelines and so on. And we can understand that in terms of natural resource commons as well, in terms of how forests are stewarded as well. And it's important to just recognise that the commons emerges from all 3, the dynamic interaction between all these elements together. So there is no commons without commoning. It's about the social production of value. And what we're seeing in recent years is that the city has become a really important platform for commoning practices. So everything from shared urban resources, physical commons like public space, vacant land, underutilised buildings. If we think about 3,000 acres, a social enterprise here in Melbourne which unlocks vacant land for urban agriculture, working with public and private sector partners. We think about important cultural commons like Melbourne's laneways and street art and laneway culture attract vast numbers of international tourists and domestic tourists. So imagine if these shared spaces were enclosed, you have to pay for access. So we just, I guess, take for granted the commons that we encounter and that we benefit from and that we contribute to day in, day out. Democratic commons, participatory budgeting, citizens' juries, these all strengthen the public sphere. Digital commons like the City of Melbourne's open data platform, where data can be shared within and between government and within and between citizens and other stakeholders. So when you see the city as a commons, you realise that our urban environments are more than just spaces for work and consumption. And what's fascinating is that we're seeing the emergence of thousands of examples of co-production or public entrepreneurship, as Eleanor Ostrom would call it, grassroots innovation, repair cafes which bring people with broken goods together with people with skills who can fix them, and there's a skill share going on there to keep goods out of landfill. urban farming, all the community garden projects that we're seeing out there, all the urban ag projects out there, all around Australia, all over the world. The maker spaces, turning sort of older industrial sites into new productive sites using 3D printing, using CNC laser cutting, open design, distributed manufacturing, tool libraries which bring together pooling resources in communities where you've got people, agreeing to form a community alliance instead of having to own lawnmowers, drills, tools. You pool them, and essentially having this activation, this empowerment of citizens working together at the neighbourhood level to create an array of common goods. So social innovation, it's about this reframing. It's important to look at how folks like Sheila Foster and Christian Ione have taken the work of Ostrom and applied it to urban environments. So you see this reframing of people understood as city users to city makers. So it's what happens when people come together and make the conscious choice to become empowered, play to their strengths, come together in solidarity with their workmates, with their friends and neighbours to make change happen in local communities. And local governments, it's important to say, are really starting to step up into this space. We're seeing the emergence of sharing cities. The two in particular that I want to look at are the City of Seoul and the City of Amsterdam. And a lot of this work has been really documented in the book that I contributed to, over 137 case studies, model policies. Sharing Cities Activating the Urban Commons is really a how-to guide, a manual for transformative change in our urban environments. So there's commons-based strategies and policies in food, land, technology, housing, work, waste, finance, mobility, energy, water, and governance, and so on. The book is available as a free PDF download. I have copies here available for sale. I launched the book here in Melbourne at the Sustainable Living Festival. I've been touring around the country, in Sydney, in Adelaide, in Canberra this year. Hope to get to Brisbane later this year as well. So I strongly encourage everyone to have a look at that book and come and have a chat to me about it afterwards. We show examples of sharing City Seoul, sharing City Amsterdam. City governments actually recognise and they have a strategic role to play as enablers, as through like a partner state approach of designing programs, designing policies, how to make their own assets, their own infrastructure more amenable to sharing. So if we look at Seoul as an example, we can see that they've basically written up this Metropolitan Government Act for the promotion of sharing. They've changed their legislation around food sharing and home sharing. They support their own domestic sharing ecosystem. They heavily regulate the likes of the platform players like Uber and Airbnb, the platform monopolies, and they really try to encourage their own local startups to thrive. They have a startup school, they have capacity building, they invest money into those new businesses, over $6 million US. And importantly, they recognise that they maintain and they own a variety of public assets, and they want to essentially hand over to the public for use during idle hours. There are now over 800 public buildings that the City of Seoul enable citizens to use when staff aren't there, which is wonderful. Similarly, Amsterdam's gone down a similar sort of path. They launched Amsterdam Sharing City in 2015, just recently. They're Europe's first sharing city. So they're also piloting the sharing of public buildings, and they're really targeting and supporting social enterprises with a social impact mission. So they are giving those organisations the opportunity to take advantage of those idle spaces. And they have a round table, an ambassador group that meets, I think, quarterly, and they set the agenda, bringing all those different players from the knowledge sector, from local government, from the corporate sector, from startups, from others together in more of a co-governance sort of style to understand how sharing can be brought to bear to help and support the people of Amsterdam and the City of Amsterdam. Importantly, it's about infrastructure for sharing, infrastructure for making, and infrastructure for repair as well. I'm a big fan of Ezio Manzini's work, design professor out of Italy, and he talks a lot about replicating and scaling and about making things visible and making things tangible. We can see this happening in places like Malmo in Sweden, where there's Western Harbour redevelopment, and the local government there has said, look, we've got old sites that we're not using, we want to refurbish them, and they've turned them into maker spaces. Fabriken is one example. They've started a bike kitchen. So these are government-owned, publicly owned buildings that have been converted for use by the community, by the grassroots innovators, by the makers, the repairers, the sharers. They've got textile works going on there as well. And so those spaces are opened up by the local government, and then those spaces are run by the community with support from the city of Malmo. Co-governance is obviously a big part of this story as well. So if we look at this, how do we as empowered communities partner with local government as a collaborator, as a facilitator? One of the best examples is from Bologna. So who's familiar with the Bologna regulation? Probably quite a few people here are familiar with it. Yeah, a few hands going up. So this really is an interesting story. A bunch of citizens were trying to install a park bench in that park there, Piazza Carducci. They realised that they went from one department to another. They couldn't get anywhere with that, and they eventually found out that it was illegal for them to install furniture to repair broken down public furniture in public parks. This set off a series of discussion, a series of experimentation with LabGov in Italy. Christian Iaione is at the forefront of taking Eleanor Ostram's work and applying it into urban environments and adapting those design principles. And so they've done through over a number of years, through prototyping, through urban experimentation, bringing their students in, bringing community stakeholders in, bringing local government and other players together to develop this Bologna regulation for the care and regeneration of the urban commons. So this is an important institutional innovation. It goes beyond co-production, and it actually is about power sharing, and it's about saying that we recognise citizens as having power, and we want to share that power with them and to enable them to steward the urban commons together. So there are over 300 collaboration agreements that have come into effect since the project launched in 2014, which means that as citizens you can approach the council in Bologna and propose placemaking projects, community gardens, repair cafes, social enterprises, a whole variety of things, and the government will then provide technical support, in-kind support, resources, other things, bring other partners in to make that happen. And they have got a map there, as you can see there, a screenshot to track urban commons projects, to visualise it. A couple of examples are a unused city-owned building turned into a social enterprise used by to run an ethical boutique in Bologna. A women's association started this ethical boutique to support migrant women and raise money for them. And then Social Streets Bologna is a hyper-local neighbourhood network which brings neighbours together out of their homes into the streets to share knowledge, to share skills, and to build solidarity networks. And that Social Streets model, which started in Bologna, has spread to hundreds of cities around the world. I believe there's been a few social streets that have started up in Australia as well. Ghent is interesting. Michelle Bowens, who was just here recently from the P2P Foundation, was involved in a fantastic research project with the city of Ghent. They are a small community. I think they're only about 350,000 people, but they have over 500 urban commons projects that are thriving in Ghent, which is amazing. So Michelle's project actually documents a variety of these, including Nest, which is shown there, which was a former library turned into a temporary urban commons lab. And that some of this is about temporary activation, similarly to like Renew Australia. We saw with Renew Newcastle, Renew Adelaide, and so on. Renew Docklands. There's a temporary site. You can get access to it as a grassroots innovator, as a maker, as a sharer, as a repairer, and use that. This example here, also from Ghent, is Neighbours of the Abbey, a community-managed church building, and Dreammaster Park, which is a community-managed park which sits on a former industrial site in a poor neighbourhood that's entirely managed by nearby residents. And I believe they've got pigs and chickens and other animals there. They're growing food there as well, and it's managed and run by the community. Right? So there's a spectrum. Like, we're not going to see all these types of co-governance happen. Like Bologna and Ghent are obviously on like the bleeding edge of this kind of innovation in terms of collaborative governance. But what Christian Iaione and Sheila Foster have done is actually develop this co-city protocol. So they're taking the insights and learnings from Bologna, and it's now spread to many other cities across Italy and around the world. And they've almost got like a toolkit to help other cities through a capacity building process and knowledge sharing to try and run similar experiments. Obviously, you can't take a cookie cutter approach. It's going to be based in and grounded to the local environment and needs of those local communities. But it's just inspiring to see the type of things that are happening. If we look closer to home, we can see similar types of co-governance arrangements happening in Australia. Lynham Commons, which I visited recently in Canberra, they are a community-run public food forest. There was a little idle bit of land, like a site sitting in between a public school and a high school and a primary school and a bike path that was just sitting there fallow doing nothing. And this community group, volunteer-run, they started a food forest using permaculture design principles. They took about a 2-year process to negotiate with the ACT government to get access to that Crown land. And over that time it was difficult, but they managed to negotiate the use of that space. It's ungated, it's open 24/7. They have working bees, they have volunteers who come in and maintain that garden, and they keep planting new things, and it's just a really nice site at that part of the park near the both schools and the bike path to activate and engage the community, and a good example of the community and government coming together to co-govern a shared urban resource. Closer to home here in Melbourne, we can see another example of how the urban commons and co-governance can operate at a really micro scale. This is the Community Growing Spaces project at Yarra. You can start a laneway pop-up garden, a planter box garden, a nature strip garden, plant fruit trees. Council provides support, runs workshops. They encourage you, or actually require you to negotiate with your neighbours on either side, so the 3 households come together and form like a little coalition or alliance, and then get support from council. And then they can start up these little micro sort of gardens on the verge and on the laneways and on the footpaths and so on. So you can see how through a tiny little space and through with a bit of government support and capacity building, communities can come together and co-govern shared resources in our cities, our neighbourhoods and towns. That's it from me. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand over now to introduce you to our next speakers, who are going to be talking about creating Sydney as a sharing city, exploring actually existing communal sharing. So excuse me while I get the next slides going. Speakers, Inka Santala is a PhD candidate at the University of Wollongong. Her research project explores sharing cities and the potential of community-based sharing initiatives to create new capacities and agency in the urban political context. In addition, Inka has been working with Share Sydney as a research volunteer. And give it up for Inka, big round of applause. We've also got Pauline McGuirk, Senior Professor of Human Geography at Wollongong, Director of AusSurf. Her research focuses on the geographies and politics of urban governance. Her current projects focus on urban regeneration, urban energy transition and governance practices involved in making cities smart in Australia. She's also editor of Progress in Human Geography. Welcome, Pauline. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Darren. Yeah, like explained, I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Wollongong at the moment, doing research on sharing cities, looking especially at the community-based and mission-driven sharing initiatives. But the presentation I'm giving today is based on a paper we have been working together with Pauline McGuirk from the University of Wollongong. And I'll just start by going through the background of it. So as demonstrated also by Darren's presentation, cities across the world have witnessed the emergence of alternative economic practices that have come to challenge norms related to production and consumption. Many of these initiatives are utilizing new ways of sharing space, skills and resources to increase the efficiency and inclusiveness of what they regard as a failing economic system. However, most of the public debates have been concentrated on the negative and disruptive implications of commercial platforms, casting a shadow on the more localized and mission-driven forms of communal sharing. By adopting the language of diverse economies and using the tactic of reading for difference rather than dominance, we will focus on the practices of communal sharing and how these might be implicated in creating new kinds of agency, capacities and other than marketing-based subjectivities in the city. So in the paper we regard communal sharing as an alternative to the profit-driven tendencies of the market economy, insofar as it encourages co-production, shared consumption and non-market forms of change. Here we define communal sharing as local sharing initiatives and practices that are run by and predominantly for local residents and do not concentrate on creating financial profit for few shareholders. Rather, our definition focuses on initiatives in which the value generated is distributed widely and given back to the local community. This kind of communal sharing rejects the view that resources and services should be provided from top down. Instead, it highlights the role of local communities in taking collective action for the common good. In this way, communal sharing can be seen to connect with the commons movement and aims to reclaim and create new shared capacities. As explained also by Darren, commons have been understood historically as material and open access resources that need to be controlled to avoid overconsumption and exploitation. Yet more recently, a growing body of research has emerged that seeks to understand commons as more than property through the social relations and structures that produce them. So instead of looking at urban commons as something that is profoundly place-based and physically defined, one option is to see it through the process of commoning. This theorization has encouraged us to look at communal sharing as a process, social process of commoning, co-creating and recreating the shared spaces, resources and services that can be regarded as urban commons. Understanding communal sharing as collaborative production of new urban commons changes the way sharing practices might be perceived and conceptualized. It seems to introduce a new kind of urban agency that expands citizens' activities from passive consumers into active collaborators and co-producers of cities' shared capacities. According to sharing advocates, these alternative practices of communal sharing demonstrate citizens' capability to self-organize and build healthier economies that rely on shared values and collaboration. At the heart of this hopeful narrative seems to live an ideal vision of socially just and environmentally sustainable sharing city. As highlighted before, the vision of a sharing city is based on an understanding of city as a commons, co-created and managed through collective action in urban communities. At the moment, there's no single place that could be referred to as the model sharing city, but this thinking has been applied in many cities around the globe. What seems to be in common with this sharing city movement is the promotion for stronger facilitation of communal sharing initiatives to meet the needs of the citizens and build new capacities across the city. One of the biggest promoters of this sharing city movement has been the news and collaboration hub Shareable. Since 2013, Shareable has been advocating for community members to self-organize and mobilize to run a series of collaborative mapping events, map jams, to make shared resources visible. Today, over 70 cities have joined the global sharing cities movement and mapped the city's shared resources and services. Here we will explore the community-based initiative Share Sydney and how it has been promoting communal sharing in Sydney. The aim of Share Sydney was to create Sydney's first sharing map and help educate city residents on how they could share more and become active members of the collaborative and healthy new economy. The findings presented here are based on participant observations and supporting interviews with members of Share Sydney during the execution of the Sharing Map project. With this, we do not seek to provide an evaluation of the work of Share Sydney, but rather begin to understand how the actors, the spaces they provide, and practices they have developed might be implicated in reshaping economic agency, capacities, and objectivities. So the Sharing Map project consisted of a map jam event and 4 community workshops held across the local government area, aiming to reveal and facilitate access to Sydney's shared resources and strengthen the local sharing economy. In the map jam, participants were invited to take part in collaborative mapping to create an online database of all sharing initiatives and projects currently existing in the city of Sydney. In addition, Share Sydney facilitated a Share Street game that aimed to promote people's thinking and familiarize them with sharing. This sharing game was also applied later in the community workshops. Having now given some background into the Sharing Map project, I will then explain how we use the concepts of agency, capacities and subjectivities to guide our analysis. Taking inspiration from the post-capitalist political imaginary nurtured by J.K. Gibson Graham, we define agency in this context as actors' ability to see alternatives to current economic system and willingness to regard communal sharing as one viable alternative. On the other hand, we use the term capacity when referring to actors' ability to take part in alternative economic practices and act according to their values. We understand subjectivity as socially constructed subject position that is not given but constantly evolving. Although we have divided the analysis section to discuss each of these aspects separately, we do recognize they're all deeply interrelated and complex. Here we have made a conscious decision to theorize conditions of possibility associated with the practices of communal sharing rather than challenges. The question guiding the analysis here is, how is the potential of Share Sydney to create new economic agency capacities as well as other than market engaged activities taking shape in the City of Sydney? Next, I will work through each of these aspects in turn, drawing out brief examples to illustrate. First, we will look at the collaborative mapping and its potential to create new kinds of economic agency. As we have discussed also here during the past couple of days, there seems to be a growing critique towards the existing capitalist economic system, which suggests there might be a fertile soil for new kinds of ideas and agency to occur. As observed during the map jam, the collaborative mapping created a suitable, enabling environment to nurture new kinds of agency, as most people demonstrated a readiness and willingness to look for change and new alternative ways of being in the city by joining the event. By bringing these like-minded people together and gathering them physically around team tables to discuss alternative options, Share Sydney managed to create space of synergies where people felt comfortable and empowered to have their voices heard. The open and welcoming atmosphere, as well as discussions facilitated by the members of Share Sydney, enabled local actors to take an active role, not only as participants, but also as the co-creators of the sharing map, as can be demonstrated through this observed instance. The process of collaborative mapping helped participants to view city space and resources as flexible and negotiated, rather than something firm and fixed from above. Letting people contribute to the creation of the sharing map helped local residents to identify alternative economic practices and made them seem more approachable and visible. Next, we will look at the co-produced sharing map and how it might be seen to create new capacities for the city. First, the map can be seen as a valuable resource, making alternative economic practices more visible and enabling people to take part in these activities. Through the online database, people can search for sharing initiatives near them, whether it's sharing spaces, resources, and skills, like men's sheds, tool libraries, or community gardens. The sharing map builds awareness of and demonstrates the existence of these shared resources, as can be demonstrated by the member of Share Sydney. In addition, the sharing map provides community members with an opportunity to review the city and their own role in it. By facilitating engagement with sites identified in the map, Share Sydney provides spaces of opportunity for people to come together, to come involved and change their current practices, enacting alternative economies. Finally, we will look at the Share Street game and how it might help identifying alternative subject positions. As we understand subjectivity as something that is not predetermined, but constantly evolving through social production, it becomes possible to consider how it can evolve and be redefined through practice. Part of what made the Share Street game interesting was the way it invited participants to reposition themselves in the local economy by rethinking issues related to ownership and consumption. In the game, participants had to form so-called households and swap with others' resources and skills to complete a common mission. What we found out that when participants were forced to swap and let go of their traditional ideas of ownership and individuality, they ended up sharing even more than they had to and found really creative ways to complete their mission. Some participants resisted the narrow and profit-oriented game design and started creating their own rules for the household sharing. Not only were they swapping resources and services as token for token, but pushing beyond rules of the game, they also used existing modes of borrowing, lending, giving and bartering to complete their challenge, as can be demonstrated here. These practices enabled participants to identify themselves not only through the existing subject positions as owners and users of common resources, but also recognize the multiple other subject positions they could inhabit as volunteers, gift givers, co-creators, and potential change makers. By creating their own rules and bringing in existing forms of sharing, participants had the opportunity to reframe themselves and trial out new behaviors and practices that already existed in the city. So to conclude, here we explored communal sharing as an alternative economic practice and used the tactic of reading for difference to make visible the moments, spaces and practices that might help nurturing new economic agency, capacities and subjectivities. By documenting the actually existing practices that took place during the Sharing Up project, we started to understand how initiatives like Share Sydney are encouraging new ways of doing, thinking and being in the city. The practice of collaborative mapping brought together strangers to work on a common project, demonstrating the process of commoning that created a shared resource for the city in form of the sharing map. This online database not only brings visibility to alternative practices existing, but gives people the opportunity to review the city as a shared space. In addition, the Share Street game provided opportunity to test new roles and behaviors, in this way creating space for new subjectivities to arise.
Thank you so much, Inka and Pauline, for sharing your research. That's wonderful. It's really rewarding from my perspective, having been involved with the Sharing Cities Network since its founding, to see how that has inspired community actors and grassroots innovators to leverage the toolkits, the open data platforms, the collaborative mapping, and the community solidarity networks to see that sort of spread and replicate all around the world. We've had map jams now in Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Canberra, and interest in it keeps growing, which is amazing because it's 5 years into the since it launched. So, and thank you so much for sharing your research. Next up, we're going to hear from McBurney to talk about bHive, a community-owned sharing economy platform from Indigo. Ian's the co-founder of bHive.coop, Australia's first platform cooperative. He's an ecological sustainability educator, an entrepreneur, facilitator, a speaker, MC, and author, and a wonderful guy to add to all that. His specialty is change practice, which we sorely need everywhere. How to inspire others around us is his key question there, and he does that in spades. He spent 5 years in the early 2000s at Box Bandicoot in Melbourne, delivering the famous environmental theatre program to 10,000 students, workplace culture change training to 6,000 staff in local government and manufacturing. So please join me in welcoming Ian McBurney.
Thank you, Darren, and thanks for having us, Darren, and for all your support since we started. Darren is a founding mentor of bHive Cooperative, and I was just looking at my family up there. I'm usually cooking pancakes for the kids at about this time on Sunday, once they finally get me out of bed. But here we are to talk about the bHive Cooperative. So, and we've heard kind of the big picture, and we've heard, we've got universities studying this, and we've got Sharing Cities reporting on this from around the world, and we're attempting to have a crack in a real community, in a real place, which is Bendigo, the centre of the known universe, isn't it, Elsie? Yes, and we have lots of wonderful new economy things happening in Bendigo, from our repair cafe to our farmers market to freewheeling fun, which is giving away bikes to the local community. We've got a local food movement. We've got a great sustainability group doing lots of wonderful renewable energy work. We've even got a council that's having a crack now. That's taken a little while, but they're having a go too, which is very exciting. So bHive is about local people, local place, local economy. Darren said all those things about me, and one of the things that's inspired bHive is Sustainability Street, and I worked on that in the early 2000s, and it was about bringing neighbours together in their own street around sustainable living, and the social benefits of that. I'm not sure whether they were more important or the environmental benefits were more important, but we want to bring local people together with their neighbours again. Robert Putnam used to talk about how in America more people watched Friends than had friends. And in Australia, you'd probably say more people, well, I don't know, did more people watch Neighbours than talk to the neighbours in the 90s? Don't know. Seems like the people in the UK are watching Neighbours. Doug Rushkoff said the only thing you need for a thriving economy are people with skills and people with needs, and to match them together. And we're so socially isolated in this modern world that we actually need help in many ways to bring people together, to share. We have big problems. We've heard about those for 3 days. I'm not going to be talking about those, but we need local solutions. And we need local people in local places creating those. And bHive is just one of many that we've heard about that is having a crack. We're one ladder over that big wall of all those problems that we face. So our vision is that we own our local digital sharing economy together as a town. And our first mission is to create a first platform that allows us to build and own and run our own sharing enterprises, providing access to local shared goods and services. We have a list of founding patrons. These people threw $35,000 at us last year so that we could get going, and without their help we wouldn't have been able to get absolutely anywhere. They're wonderful local people, in many cases from Bendigo. This was us after we completed our cooperative rules, and this is what it felt like doing the cooperative rules. That was great fun, trying to, and we got great help from Anthony McMullen in the process. But yeah, it's like trying to bring something from 150 years ago into a digital future is quite tricky. So here's Nicole. Nicole bears no resemblance whatsoever to a real person in Bendigo called Nicole, who is a friend of ours. When you join bHive, when Nicole joins bHive, she'll get access to her shared village, and the idea is that is the neighbours that live around you. You can communicate with those people, you can set up events with those people, you can share free resources with those local people, and it's really about building well-being. We want people, when they join bHive, to be a human being and a neighbour and a friend before you even think about the local economy. We want the local economy to come from that as a first point, as a baseline. Plugged into your village is a network of cooperatives that we want to work with that will build peer-to-peer sharing services that will run across the city. Now that could be in energy, it could be in food, it could be in space, it could be in stuff. So the end goal is that we have cooperatives all around the town that own and run and operate our local economy. So the Sharing Hive is part of bHive. We're currently talking to Modo, who are a car sharing cooperative in Vancouver, about a partnership because they've spent 20 years developing the technology, and it's actually quite silly for us to try and develop that technology again. When one of the rules of being a cooperative is that you cooperate with other cooperatives and share with other cooperatives. So we could have relationships with other tech companies from around the world who've already done amazing technology. So there's two other parts for Nicole. There's a shared economy and there's a village, but what we're also working into bHive is that a percentage of everything that Nicole spends in the shared hive goes into a shared giving account, and she can allocate that to projects locally that will aim to eradicate poverty and restore the ecology locally. And then we've got a shared city part. And really, at the start, that might be organisations saying, we've got this event, City of Greater Bendigo, or Bike Bendigo, or the Sustainability Group, or the Repair Cafe, saying this is what we're doing. But if we end up in a local place with a good 10 or 20,000 people on a platform, that lends itself to participatory democracy, to crowdsourcing of ideas and crowd writing, and that sort of idea will become a little bit more exciting down the track when we have more people involved. So your giving hive, you choose where your money goes, but it goes to local projects. And this is really the bottom line. We want to make sure that we don't have poverty and that we have ecology in our local place. Participatory democracy, I covered that. So when Nicole joins bHive, she signs up, she becomes a member, She can also earn rebates and discounts from bHive. We want the central bHive to be about reputation management. You own your own data. You control your own identity, and your reputation goes with you right around the town, which happens already. In Bendigo we have 115,000 people, and if you do something silly, everyone else in the town knows about it within about 15 minutes. Is that right, Elsie?
Yes.
Yeah, so we have, because we're a country town, we have that level of reputation already, and we should be able to use that to grow and build an economy. Trust is the currency of the sharing economy, and local places already have that, and we need to use that. So Nicole can also earn income from these sharing enterprises, and she can pay to use them if she wants. And that's an access economy rather than an ownership one. Those enterprises will put 1% of their spending back into bHive, and then 4% from people's spending will go into the giving fund. So these things are really important. I mean, we've seen what Facebook, and we've seen what Uber, and we've seen what the Russian government are doing with our data. There was actually an article this morning saying that there are many federal government agencies in Australia that are already using our data for all sorts of things that we don't even know what it is. So it's really important that we own and control our own data and who has access to that data. And our reputation is really important as well. And we want that to be about people as a human being, not just people as a consumer. So, you know, Bendigo's only got 115,000 people, but if we had 20,000 members, you know, we can have some pretty impressive dollars staying in our local economy and being turned over in our local economy and being run and owned by local people in our local economy. People in Bendigo are already spending $2.5 billion a year on goods and services, and most of that is leaving town, and most of that is leaving the country. So we actually have enough. We have enough money in Bendigo to provide for people's needs. And what we need is that money circulating around, and there's been lots of research done on local currencies and local spending and the benefits that have, and the number of people's wallets that goes through in a local place. That's what we want to do. We're trialling our Villages software at the moment. We have 4 communities looking at using our Village Hive, our first one, and they're sharing access to things, and they're communicating with each other, and they're using it. There's not enough in startup language. There's not enough pain points for people to leave something like Facebook to do just this. So, and we know that, but when we've got peer-to-peer enterprises that plug in, there will be, because Facebook can't do that. And then down the track, when people start to realise what's happening with their data, they might be a little bit excited to be in a cooperative and own that data. We're pretty proud of being a cooperative. We're happy to work with cooperatives everywhere around the world. We've all got a lot of work to do. Yeah, there's lots of advantages of co-ops, and we've heard about that this week already. This is a slide from Trebor Schultz from the New School in New York. There are lots of platform cooperatives around the world. There's none that we can find that are working on a place-based solution. They're all working on service-based solutions, but what we're saying is that you and your neighbours in your local place are really important, and we're having a go at it in that way. We're happy to, we don't want to create some sort of big thing that we then license to other people. We're interested in growing bHive to the size of Bendigo, and then it won't need to grow anymore, and we're interested in then just giving it away to any other local place that wants to set up a cooperative and wants to use the software to build their own peer-to-peer economy as well. We've got our website, we've got a prospectus, you can find out what we're doing. We'd love people to get involved. We're having conversations with all sorts of organisations from around the world. We had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with Holochain, the distributed internet organisation, and that was a mind-blowing conversation. They're doing amazing work. They're not quite ready yet to do stuff in the real world, but they're doing amazing work. And I love their language, and I love what they're doing. We're talking to ShareTribe about creating a partnership to set up a marketplace. We're involved with the New South Wales, the Business Council of Cooperatives and Mutuals been great. We've had some advice recently from the Melbourne Law School. Shareable have been fantastic. We're involved in the Global Platform Cooperative Network. We're speaking at conferences. We're a member of the Incubator Co-op, who are running an event in the next hour or so, Anthony, I believe. And they're a great mob as well. But what we really want to do, this is Janine Benyus talks about, you know, we're building something on the World Wide Web, but Janine likes to talk about the Wood Wide Web. And the Wood Wide Web is actually what we're starting to understand about the way forests collaborate and share access to resources and information. And, you know, Charles Darwin didn't actually talk about competition all that much, but it got written down in the literature a lot. And what we're actually discovering is, you know, the trees on the top of the hill are collecting sunlight, and they're turning that into energy and sending it through the mycorrhizal layer in the soil to the trees in the valley. And the trees in the valley are collecting water and they're sending it the other way up the hill. And trees are sharing information. They release scents in the air when a wood borer appears at the edge of a forest to let the others know to put their defences up. A forest is a local peer-to-peer collaborative economy. And that's what we're aiming for with bHive. Rushkoff said, you know, the only thing you need is people with needs, people with skills. We're creating one type of platform that might achieve that aim and that end. And we would love you to be involved. If you want to talk to us, we would love to talk to you. We're looking for partners, we're looking for people to help. We're also open to having new board members, new founding mentors. We're open to all sorts of conversations, and we'd love to have a chat to you about it. Thanks very much for having us.